For having me, really appreciate it. I will promise that I'm not here to focus on the everyday headline of COVID and I guess maybe presidential debates, but as Carson said, I'll avoid that. But instead, what I'm really here to do is help you filter out some of the noise that you're hearing in all the headlines as it relates to all the roles we have in the room. We've all got different backgrounds, whether it's architecture, contracting, owners rep, owners, developers, whatever it may be. So, how to filter that out, not to panic about what to change in your specs, your design of rooms, your layouts, everything associated with that. These two market sectors in particular, these two market sectors in particular were some that we heard recently were of high interest, and so I wanted to share those. Because I think even if you're not focused in these two, you're going to see some relation to those sectors that you may be in. But to give you a little bit more background, I wasn't sure how big this screen would be, so I'm sure those of you in the back aren't reading word for word. But a little overview of Darden Company. We're a 20-year-old firm. Jason Hughes, Kyle Taylor, and myself, we purchased the company back in 2018 from its former owner. And we're trying to quickly expand beyond our A&B Sports and Entertainment Group client. So we were growing that list of clients quickly. We grew to about 8 people, and then in July of 2019, we acquired Collins Project Management, which some of you may know from the healthcare, education, country club, a few sectors that we weren't already in. So we got to capture those and bring those in-house. So we're now about 21 people, covering about 7 to 8 market sectors. Of those employees in-house, we've got an in-house architect, a lot of folks with contractor and architecture backgrounds, some of which I think I've heard from some of you have even worked for or with you in the past, and a recently nominated CMAA president, which a few of you I think are members of. So speaking of CMAA, they recently, some of you may have gotten this survey, they polled about over 100 people, just asking them what they wanted to hear about next in the market, or in their, your future meetings there at CMAA. And it was overwhelming. And I know these numbers don't look outrageous, but compared to the other 10 sectors that they asked about, everybody wanted to know about the future of healthcare in both design and construction, as well as arenas and stadiums or sports and rec. So that's why I'm here today, just kind of focus on those quickly and explain what we're seeing. So again, I promise not to use the COVID word as many times as I can, but when COVID first came about, owners and architects were bombarded by vendors, right? Everybody was coming out of the woodwork saying, we've got the latest and greatest miracle product. It's a sprayer, it's a light, it's an air conditioner, it's anything to make you look like you were the most innovative and leading in the fight against it. But with those, they all came with either major capex, capital expenditures, or operational expenses long term for the owners. So people started to pause and think, what are these options and what's worth my time and money? So to give you an idea, specifically in the healthcare market, we all know isolation rooms. Isolation rooms are technically considered any room that ejects 100% of its exhaust air and doesn't mix it into the building or recirculate air anywhere in the building. As you can imagine, that's from a design standpoint, you're adding air handlers, adding exhaust fans, extra duct work, a lot of money. It's not even recommended by the CDC. They are recommending negative airflow, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But the negative airflow, of course, and we'll get into that graphic. I know that looks confusing, but that is something the CDC did recommend. But OR suites, another type of room designed with HEPA filters. But what people were starting to think, well, I'll just go buy a bunch of HEPA filters and go cram them into my existing air handler units. You'll choke them out, you'll burn them up, you can't do it. So people realize, they're not going to go retrofit their current buildings with them, but moving forward in renovations, maybe a few more rooms with those types of filters. But we even saw a temporary solution created with the client where they took the windows out, literally put in, fancy painted plywood and a window unit, like straight out of a construction trailer. Again, clearly a temporary move, but it was interesting looking for the hospital itself. And then just to try to help explain this graphic, one of the things that was recommended was in those, I don't know how many architects or MEP engineers we have in the room, but you typically exhaust air, and you can see it in this room, near the doors. And all the air comes from that side of the room and then sucks out near the doors and near the thermostats. By doing that, you've got a whole mix of air coming across everybody in that room, doctors, nurses, patient, and whatever that patient may be in there with could more easily be spread. What they're talking about, think of this as an architect, moving that return air over the patient's head and putting the supply at his feet. You've got a very clean airflow through the room and limiting circulation to where others could contract it, whether it's somebody attending to the patient or not. But it's a matter of a quick design change, no cost to the owner whatsoever, and mystery solved. But also kind of talking about waiting rooms, you guys have probably seen, now you've seen them in restaurants for a while, but these big overhead glowing purple boxes. And we were hearing from clients that said, well, should I put one of these in just so everybody knows I reacted? And they said, or do I put it back at house and then go, it's working back there, but nobody knows it's on. Do I have a sign that says, I bought a fancy light for the air conditioner and it's running, so rest assured. Then you've got, with those lights, keep in mind, those are cleaning surfaces and maybe airflow across the room over time. But if we're sitting together like we are today and the person next to you has COVID, it's not doing a thing. So again, they're very expensive, and they only cover 400 square feet. So think of a room like this, we'd have a couple dozen of them. So not effective, not practical. And then lastly, the increase in air exchange. So a room like this might exchange the air about 6 to 10 times an hour. We're talking about to really reduce the potential for infection, bump it up to as many as 22 to 27. So you can think about the operational expenses here. You've got the energy efficiency of running your units on full blast at all times, or you've got long-term maintenance of all those UVC lights, purple lights you're replacing at least once or twice a year. And so it's just not practical. I mean, operationally and from a CapEx standpoint. So instead, the takeaways I want you to leave with, and then what we're hearing are the behavioral changes more than anything. We do still have a few clients that say, hey, I want the optics of putting a light in my waiting room or in the hallway or in the office space, just so people know I care. And they realize it's a little bit effective. It does some of its work overnight in sanitizing to an effect, but it's more for optics, just so people feel safe in a culture. If anybody else is a company owner, when you're dealing with your staff, you've got to be sensitive and you've got to react to every culture uniquely. So, but we still wouldn't recommend it. And then waiting room circulation and spacing, that's a matter of spacing out furniture, people, signage, and the circulation is just having a single point of ingress and egress to try to prevent some of the otherwise circulation of the past. And again, I'm trying to emphasize things that we think are permanent, not just temporary. You could argue, again, I'm not going into presidential debates here, but whether this is a fad, whether it'll happen again, but these are the things we think that if you're designing for the long term, are going to matter indefinitely, or at least be effective indefinitely. And the design changes is the airflow and circulation of those rooms. Again, I kind of mentioned with that last graphic how air flows through the room. You can just get smart about where you're exhausting, whether it's over people's chairs. Think data centers with hot and cold aisles. I mean, don't go overboard, but you can take a different approach. And then more negatively pressured rooms. That's literally a matter of early MEP design and some test and balance. So, but not switching to new types of rooms, more isolation rooms, anything like that. So, really, the key takeaway is try to help your clients make the best decisions without going overboard or overspending, and avoid the trend, really. So this is more my realm, sports entertainment. As I think Stephen and Chris said, I was on Mercedes-Benz Stadium with the rest of my team, and none of this stuff existed at the time we finished, but we quickly started getting calls about, hey, what do we do? How far do we go with this? And we quickly scrambled to try to find products and ideas for them. And the thing that's unique about arenas and stadiums is you're talking about the central bowl or arena area. You've got a million plus cubic feet. So that's served by 4 or so air handlers that are all pushing air from the bottom of the bowl up to the top of the roof and exhausting it that way. So in fact, when we were building Mercedes-Benz, we thought we were being innovative. There's what's called the stack effect. All the air wants to suck in the doors at the event level and blow out the roof. So we thought, okay, let's take advantage of that. And when the weather's good outside, we'll open the roof or partially open the roof or some vents and louvers and all that, and use that to just cool the whole thing. But what you're doing is, I guess you get what you pay for. All the cheap seats are getting all the stinky air. And so you don't have the options you do in like a hospital or an office where you can isolate rooms and you can negatively pressure, I suppose, but not quite the same. And then also the circulation patterns of people. Usually you come in 3 to 4 different entrances, and you've got 75,000 people, so they're all wedged in, and they're coming in and out the same ways, but also they're encouraged to loiter and pack in concourses and concessions and retail and sponsorship zones. And so you've got a new behavior to train. And also, if you're trying to sanitize in a different way, you're not going to walk into a stadium and follow the hopscotch squares to your seat. You're gonna want to walk around and enjoy the whole facility. So the considerations were, again, this UVC light treatment, but obviously you're not turning the halo board of Mercedes-Benz Stadium into a purple light. You put it back in the air handlers, but these things you're talking 84, 96-inch ducts, and so we ran the numbers on it. You've got to have like a series of 20 of these lights per air handler and replace them every 3 to 6 months, because just the volume of air to pump through a million, or in the stadium's case, 2 million cubic feet. Sorry. So that wasn't going to work. The thermal screening. That's the thermal cameras that people are seeing. They're talking about you put in somebody's lobby, or in this case, you put them in security line. I don't know about you guys, but I get scanned like 3 or 4 times a week. Has anybody else been 96 degrees for the last 3 months? Yeah. Oh, good. You're moving up. So I'm not buying the accuracy of those things, and I don't think anybody else is either. So I guess if I really had a fever, I'd be 98.6. So then I'd know to go home. The touchless bathroom fixtures, you're already seeing the trend in this, and this is one that, from a design team perspective, you can already incorporate or probably already have. The touchless doors, this is more, are you going to propping all the bathroom doors open? Are the entry doors into the stadium open or touchless? Probably. So, but again, just something to keep in mind when you think about, a lot of these stadiums now have offices in them too, admin offices, and other ways to approach those throughout their spaces. Hand sanitizers, everybody's doing this, but when you think about it in the grand scheme, this is the kind of the path of least resistance. It's the cheapest option, but you think about it in the stadium, you've got to have hundreds and hundreds of these things to really cover where everybody's going to walk and be encouraged to walk up to one. So it's still really expensive, but signage on walls and floors, you can have the dots leading into concessions and to restrooms, and then temporary signs stuck on walls and exit this way but enter this way. That can get complicated. And also, think about a new stadium, they don't want that stuff everywhere. They want it to have a clean look, and I'll get to the alternative to that in a second. But and then temporary partitions. If you go to the stadium, and you'll see this, I think they're going to show a game in the stadium again with fans in it next weekend. All the suites have plexiglass between them. You go in their offices, they put plexiglass between all those. You're seeing this option for locker rooms. They're putting plexiglass in that. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then, of course, in concessions, you've got, this could be between you and the vendor, or even in security lines between you and the aisle next to you. A lot of money for something that I think a lot of people would assume is a trend. Now, what kind of infrastructure you could put in for the what-if scenario, it's I guess, again, it's client specific. But again, what we're seeing and what's we think is trending versus what's permanent, there are a few design changes you can think of. So the signage, the dots on the floor in the restroom, that's an easy one. Concessions, dots on the floor to wait for that, but ticketing's already pretty much touchless, so that's an easy one. But then in the stadium, in Mercedes-Benz, for example, I know I keep going back to that, I've only built one. We had 2,200 TVs in the facility, every one of which is IPTV, and you can go convert it to anything you want it to say. You find its location and it turns into directional signage, exit this way, go up these stairs only and down these stairs only. So something to consider if you get into this market in the future of try to think of that flexibility up front with your controls, AV and IT moving into the early part of design, because it can save you a lot of temporary and unsightly signage in the future. Touchless sanitization stations. So what's unique with stadiums is everything can be sponsored. So if Purell wants to go put 300 sanitizers around the stadium, it's likely the team can get it for free. So again, this is something early when you're thinking of sponsorship zones and design. You might throw that on the list. It might be the new norm that some of that stuff comes with it. The way that we've seen Georgia Pacific in the past be sponsored to restroom fixtures. Seat spacing. This really isn't a design consideration. You're not going to spread out the seats in the stadium, but the team operationally can consider how to spread people out. It's really more of a team culture thing. Ingress and egress, just a matter of teaching people through some marks on the grounds and ticketing. But mobile concession orders was a cool one that we've heard the Falcons are doing now. So the only way they'll let you order concessions is from your seat with your app, and then you walk up and it's a grab and go. And so from a design team perspective or construction perspective, think about space planning in both back of house and front counter. Do you have a bunch of to-go items out there all at once? Are containers needed to be stored in a different way? I do think that trend's going to continue. I mean, it makes concessions more pleasant. People are getting used to doing everything on their phone. I think that's here to stay. So something to keep in mind. Operations, this is easy. Staggered times. I mean, sure, you've got 1,000 people that have to manage a game, but they can stagger their arrival, and that's more of an operational thing, not design. But what is a design consideration is reconsider the way employee locker rooms, uniform distributions, just the way those are laid out, prepackaged, what kind of laundry is on site, and valet services. So this is one, as a design team member or a civil engineer, valet services may be greatly reduced or a thing of the past for VIP. And so think about what's the premium arrival experience for VIPs if it's not valet. Somebody going to get them in a golf cart, somebody walking them to the front door, or is their parking space nicer or wider? Just things to think about. And then kind of wrap it up here, but athlete spaces, we're seeing the plastic dividers kind of like, I don't know if you can tell in that picture, between every locker room, which just makes no sense to me. I mean, you're in there changing at a distance, then you go out and run into each other. I don't know what you accomplished, but touchless receptacles, again, you've probably already got that in most of your buildings, whether it's sports or other. So carry on as usual there. And then given the number of athletes and coaches that come into a specialized back of house door, I mentioned that the screening almost looks like a TSA archway where you're getting thermal scanned and sprayed down and everything of the sort. Given the limited people that are arriving to the stadium and staggered over time, be it basketball, football, whatever it is, that may be worth the investment. Just getting the athletes screened on the way in and check that box. You probably only need a couple of them, but Food and beverage, I mentioned cashless payments already part of the thing. Falcons do it as a policy. They've got, I think, some way to get prepaid credit cards or something in the building in a spot or two, but there's no cash allowed. So helps that exchange. So I mentioned prepackaged options. And then MEP. The great thing with a stadium is you crank up the air for events, and then otherwise you almost don't need to turn it on. I mean, you need to keep the place from freezing or peeling paint off the wall from heat. But for very limited times a month, I mean, tens of hours a month versus an office or a medical facility, you can crank up that air and keep airflow maximized and the exchange rate maximized. So for those of you, if there are any MEP commissioning agents, anybody in the room, think about that in the future and make sure that system's capable of doing that. And then we already mentioned the automated restroom fixtures. Of course, your operations guys are going to debate, do I want to pay to run power to those? Do I want to pay to replace batteries all the time? Or do I want the air dryer versus the paper towel dispenser, blowing stinky air around with whatever virus in it? All things to consider, but that might help you in talking to your clients. Just bring it over the tipping point if they're sort of on the fence about it. So something to talk to them about. So that said, hopefully as you return to your respective projects, at least you might have found a soundbite in there or two that could help you consider or maybe do a little research on ways to incorporate some of these. But again, the whole point is, don't overreact, don't fall for some of the trends, don't panic that we've got to go a wholesale change to healthcare or really any of our sectors. But with that, I'll shut up, man. Questions? Yep.
I'm Stacy with Lincoln. I wanted to know, how do you foresee this impacting lead and sustainability efforts, where we were heavy hard on several years ago, and then we trended into the well environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of suspect like the technology of what this most recent pandemic has brought us is pushing us more to a better well environment. How do you see that impacting both sustainability and well?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the way those are kind of, those two organizations are leaders in trends and in the industry that, they were the first to consider, hey, you get credits for water reclamation and things that otherwise owners didn't want to spend money on. I think that LEED will start to consider leniency towards, say, energy efficient credits if somebody does say, yeah, but this is for cleanliness or air circulation or something to that effect. But if they don't, you've got the challenge of, well, I want to run my air at a 22 times an hour exchange rate. And LEED goes, yeah, well, you're burning up the environment, so you're not getting that point. I think they've got to look into that and consider what side they want to take. But then, well, I think if anything, they would add categories related to some of these things that, sanitizers and touchless and natural light or UV light. I could see where that becomes a category. But again, I just don't know that it lasts. I think given the culture of those organizations, they'll be quick to kind of be on the forefront of offering it. But I don't know that either one will last. It's that careful balance between what do we change just enough to avoid one of these again versus going overboard and we're wearing masks the rest of our lives. So I don't know.
It pushes clients and developers to say, do I want to spend money still trying to meet these requirements? Do I want to build into that environment and carry and get those credits for that? So it's a challenge in the market for developers that are developing now.
Yeah.
This is the time you want to take those things into consideration.
Yeah, you talk about like on LEED, we go into a specialized commissioning, and you have an economizer mode that pumps in fresh air, things like that. That's already advantageous to LEED and this topic, right? So it works for both. But yeah, there are others that if I'm burning UV lights all day and I can't show the efficiency of my building anymore. It's hurting you. So do they make exceptions? I think so. Yep.
Not necessarily applicable to your presentation in this particular environment, but we're in commercial interiors, and we've been driving the conversation towards workplace culture and workplace strategy. Asking questions like to a group of folks that work at all levels within an organization. Where do you, how often are your heads down? How often are you collaborating? Where do you work, and how do you see the pandemic affecting you moving forward? And we gather that data, and collectively the leadership teams are able to kind of make decisions that speak to their workplace culture and allows them to make decisions moving forward as to how they want to maybe reconfigure the space moving forward, that is based on data that's going to create more long-term results for them. So are you seeing that? Is that a conversation that you guys are driving in the more of the commercial sector?
Yeah, a little bit. So the hoteling desk option seems like people are hesitating on it, and more going to either a dedicated desk or your focus rooms where someone can sort of rent that for the day, but from a cleaning perspective, they know every day I need to hit those. But the old hoteling, like just sitting where you want every day, I was PwC consultant for a while, and I hated it. I hated the idea of I got to get to work and find a desk and then move all my stuff from one place to another. And then you touch the phone and kind of use my cell.
Well, what it's driving to is the work from home, policy. People are obviously looking at a more robust strategy of working from home over the long term, so it can drive that conversation, allow them to get to some decision making.
A really interesting one we've got going on now. Emory is consolidating a bunch of their admin into the old North Lake Mall, about 200,000 square feet. And we started the project at 240,000 square feet, and then everything hit mid-design. And they said, time out. We just heard from 9 departments that only 70% of their folks are coming in, or they need them to come in. So we cut it back to 150. And they said, actually, some of them aren't, it's not working, so can you bump it back up? Now we're back somewhere in the middle of 180, but there were certain departments, call centers, they don't need to be in. They have a 20% in-person ratio, but then there are others, I guess, there's just so much more collaboration that they said they were kind of back towards, well, we need to kind of lean back towards the original plan, because, but a few said, everybody's loving it, it's working perfectly, they enjoy being at home, they're more efficient. They don't punch the clock. They're just kind of working, as long as they need to get their job done. And we're seeing better performance out of people.
Well, and then school from home started. So.
Yeah. And then that wrecked all that, right?
Changes all that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you talk about the HEPA and the UV lights and things like that to increase sanitation and disinfection. Are you seeing that anybody is analyzing the chemicals that they're using? Because if you look at what most people use to disinfect, it's a quaternary ammonium compound. That's the cheapest, but it does have a 7 to 10 minute dwell time. So a lot of people, they spray and wipe, which you're not killing anything. But the cloths also have, certain harmful effects, like, they're endocrine disruptors, whatever, with a lot of exposure. So if they're using this and disinfecting more and more, are they analyzing what chemicals they're using in these environments?
From our perspective, really dealing with a client who's thinking long-term operationally, in almost everyone I can think of, that's an overnight treatment. And so even the 7 to 10 minute effectiveness, they're not concerned with it. But you're seeing them, buy new janitorial equipment that's spraying the place, almost fogging the place down, and now they're kind of thinking, maybe that's a good practice once a week, even if we dial it back. But hadn't really talked much or read much on what you mentioned in terms of if people need to get in the habit of coming up to a desk and hitting it with a disinfecting wipe, then they need to, is your point, I mean, they need to wipe it down and then go find somewhere else to be for 7 to 10 minutes while it works its magic?
Well, no, but if it's not going to kill the germs.
Yeah.
So if you read, the EPA registration on it and the category of what it is and all that. So I have a little bit of a nerdy background in infection control, so I just think about this stuff. But talk about some of the gimmicks or the things that are being sold.
Yeah.
There's this magic water stuff that's not EPA registered. I think Marta was sold that. But that's just along the lines of some of the stuff that's being sold for knee-jerk reactions. But
Yeah, I ought to connect you with, I'd mentioned we've got an in-house architect, and he's just geeked out about reading up on this stuff, just for reasons like this, just whether it's worth something or not. But I guarantee he's read into it. You guys would have a long conversation about it. All right, thank you. Oh, one more?
One more. So talking about the efficiency and productivity, they're not the same thing. So when the leader of JP Morgan Chase comes out and says our efficiency is high, but our productivity is down 70%, that fact alone will drive people back into the workplace because you are more efficient, but you lose that synergistic connectivity with employees, longer time for turnaround, decision making, bringing product to market, which benching and collaboration zones increase. Now those are taken away. So that's going to really play heavy back into bringing people back into the workplace, besides the socialization of individuals.
I hope you're right.
Yeah.
I want my office full again too. We've got 20 employees. I see about 4 a day. So it's a sad environment at the moment. So, all right, thanks guys.
In closing, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. Get y'all here back again soon, and if you know any good